Thank you, everybody, so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I know we have a lot of great speakers teaching all kinds of stuff, and I really appreciate you taking the time and being here with me. As Gabe said, this is advanced Photoshop techniques you need to know. We're going to discuss a lot of the new features in Photoshop, primarily GenFill and AI, which requires access to the internet. So we're going to pray to the internet gods, and hopefully we are going to be able to show what I have planned. If not, I have a plan B that doesn't require the internet, still advanced techniques. Very quickly, I don't really like to talk about myself too much, but in case you don't know me, my name is Jesús Ramirez. I teach Photoshop. I've been a working professional for over 20 years. If you have any questions, you can take a photo of that QR code. It takes you to my website, my contact form. Feel free to reach out with any comments, concerns, complaints, if there are any. But yeah, feel free to go to that website. Again, the YouTube channel is the Photoshop training channel on YouTube. That's an old screenshot. It's now like over 2 million subscribers. I don't even know anymore.
Woo!
But woo! Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I've done a lot of professional work for companies that you might know, like these on screen. But more recently, I've been working as a finisher in the Hollywood industry. You guys know what that is? Finisher? Finisher? No? Wow, no one. What that is I make movie posters for TV and film. So those are some of the recent shows I worked on. Confession, I haven't seen any of those shows, so you guys will let me know if they're good or not. But up to this point, I haven't worked on a poster that I've actually watched. Like if it's a show or a movie, I haven't seen them, but I do work on the posters. But I hear Hacks is good. Yes. But yeah, so what a finisher is the studio has an idea for a poster and they bring it to a person like me who finishes the concept or the idea. There's a rough draft and we just make it look pretty and make it look nice. So I do a lot of compositing in my professional work, and that's where I get a lot of the techniques that I like to teach on my YouTube channel and conferences. My workflow is based with the context that my files will be seen by dozens, if not hundreds of other people. So I like to keep my files clean, tight, concise, everything modularized so I can move things left, right, center, and not break the composite. So that's the way I like to work. And for those of you that subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll see that that's how I try to teach on my YouTube videos as well. Also, this is B&H's 50th anniversary. So yay, B&H, thank you, 50th. And that's a very incredible milestone, and I was recently counting how many conferences I've been a speaker at. I've been a speaker for about 10 years, as we were just discussing, and it turns out that this is my 50th conference. So what a coincidence. Number two is, this is more of a personal thing for me. Second anniversary, also in 2 weeks, second anniversary for me, that I had a very, very traumatic medical emergency. For those of you that follow me on YouTube know that I had a stroke. I almost died while playing soccer. I somehow injured my neck that caused a cervical dissection, and that led to a blood clot that went into my brain. I collapsed and I almost died. I woke up in the hospital the next day and they told me that I would be disabled, that I wouldn't be able to move my left side. You can see my left hand there looking a little weird. And my goal while I was in the hospital was to come back and be a quote-unquote normal speaker at events again. So thankfully, it took me about 6 months to recover from a stroke. And now my body's back to normal. I'm playing sports again. I'm trying to stay fit and active. Thank you. And the reason I'm saying all this is that that's my cerebellum now, the white part in the back and the bottom. That's everything that died. So if I forget a keyboard shortcut or mispronounce, some of you guys know that I had a stroke. So if you're thinking, did this guy have a stroke? Yes, I did. But the cool thing is that I got to wear a heart monitor, and I thought I was Iron Man for like the longest time. I don't have it anymore, but anyway, I just wanted to share that personal story because it just happens to be another anniversary. So those are my two quote-unquote anniversaries that are happening alongside B&H's 50th anniversary. But enough about me. Everybody's here to learn Photoshop. I'm sure everybody here has seen on my YouTube channel, other YouTube channels, on social media, friends, everywhere, the new GenFill in AI. That's the generative technology that Photoshop has to generate pixels. And what we generate could be a million and one things. We're going to look at some examples here today. But basically, if you don't know what GenFill is, it's basically an AI that has analyzed millions of images on Adobe stock and other licensed sources. So this does not include movies, this does not include Mickey Mouse or anything like that. Anything that is copyrighted, Adobe hasn't analyzed, but it does analyze Adobe stock images, and it makes it great for doing a lot of things in Photoshop. So again, we're gonna look at some examples. The first example I wanna show you is, we have this beautiful photo here, but we have two very distracting elements. We have this gentleman sitting here on the steps, and this pole here with this lady. With Gen Fill, it is very easy to simply create a selection around the person or anything really. Click on Generative Fill. That's called the taskbar, that thing that pops up now. That is new in Photoshop. And by the way, I should be very, very clear. I'm using Photoshop Beta, which if you are a member of the Creative Cloud, you have access to. So let me just show you how to get to it in case you haven't installed it. So if you're a member of the Creative Cloud, you can go into Apps, scroll down to where it says Beta Apps, and the Photoshop is beta. The Photoshop Beta is here for you to install on your computer. So you will install two versions of Photoshop, the full release, Photoshop 2023, and the beta version. I'm currently working in the beta version, and for the rest of the class, that's what I'll be on. But if you're a member of the Creative Cloud, you have it. Anyway, so in the Photoshop Beta, we have the taskbar here. When you make a selection, you'll get different buttons that allow you to do different things. When a selection is active, the Generative Fill button will show up. You can click on that, and you can leave it blank. You don't, at this moment, the Photoshop AI does not understand commands. So if you tell it to do something, it's not gonna do it. It understands adjectives and verbs. So if you type the word remove, it doesn't really matter. You can just leave it blank. So just leave it blank, and Photoshop will remove whatever is on screen in the perfect world. So Photoshop right now is sending this image to the cloud, and I'm assuming some monkeys or something are typing up on the computer and figuring it all out. I don't know how it works, but it's incredible how that works, right? And you can click on the 3 different variations. So Photoshop gives you 3 variations to choose from, and you can just click on them to see which one you like best. Like this one, we can see this doorknob there that has the highlight, the perspective, the depth of field. It looks amazing. That's the one I like best, so I can leave it there. One important thing to note, the more generations you create, the more you bloat your file size. So if you know for sure you're not going to use a variation, you can click on the 3 little, actually they changed it, this is brand new. Before, you used to click on that little 3-dot icon and hit remove. Now, they have this little trash icon here that you just click on. So there you go. I completely forgot they added that trash icon outside of that menu. If you're unhappy with your result, you can just click on Generate again, and Photoshop will generate 3 more images. And you can just keep generating until you find something that works for you. In this case, I'm just going to let it finish instead of canceling it. But you can press the cancel button to cancel the operation. Again, just select the one you like best. And just for the example here, I'm going to show you what it looks like when you remove this pole here. And I did a really bad selection, and it's very difficult to create a selection with this trackpad and this podium here, but there you go. I'm going to click on Generative Fill, click on Generate, and again, Photoshop will generate the pixels there in just a moment. And we'll give it a second here. And you need to be online, yes. You 100% need to be online. This operation is not happening on your computer. It's doing the computing in Adobe server somewhere. And as you can see, the results are very incredible. I mean, just look at how realistic those flowers look, her dress. And I really didn't have to do much work. In the old days, you would have to clone, do a bunch of different things, spot healing and all that. And now we just draw a quick selection, and there you go. Let me open up another file here to show you a different example. And we only have 40 minutes. I thought we had like an hour, but that's okay. For those of you that have seen me talk before, you guys know that I like to throw out a bunch of content. Just for, I'm gonna show this. So I'm gonna show you guys an old way of removing objects from a photo, and then I'll show you how cool this GenFill AI is. So approximately 4 years ago, I was in the Louvre Museum in Paris, and I shot these photos. And I didn't have my camera, I just had my phone. I didn't have a tripod. And I knew that I could take a lot of photos and then merge them all together in Photoshop to remove the people from the background. And what I did there is I just stood there with my phone and tried not to move and shot approximately 16 photos, gave enough time for people to move. So that Photoshop could then look at the pixels that are not consistent between all the photos and remove them using a stack mode. What that means, and this is very intuitive. Actually, that's a joke. It's really not intuitive at all. If you go into File, Scripts, and you go into this option here called Statistics, you can actually bring in all those photos and do what I just said. Put them together in a stack. Apply a stack mode. It's almost like a blending mode. It's just math that figures things out. And it should remove the pixels that are not constant. So if you imagine having a lot of different photos, people, cars, all that sort of stuff are moving, but the buildings in the background are constant. So this is really what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go into the folder menu here, click on Browse, and find my Louvre Museum folder. There it is. I'll press OK, and Photoshop uploads those 14 photos I shot of the Louvre Museum. Remember, I did not have a tripod, so I was trying to hold very, very still, but I was still breathing and still moving and still being alive that I couldn't hold perfectly still. So my images were not 100% aligned. So I can tell Photoshop to do it for me. I can click on Attempt to automatically align source images, and I can now select that stack mode, that blending mode, that math that's going to figure all this out. And the one that you want is called median. So the stack mode is median, and you have all these files loaded in here. You can just press OK. Now Photoshop is going to bring all those files, put it into a smart object, a container, and it's going to apply that stack mode. And if everything works, it will remove everyone from the photo, leaving me with a blank photo, which is pretty cool. And this technique is very old. I'm sure a lot of you probably have seen it here. That's been around since like Photoshop 5 or something, not like CS5, like 5, like way back in the day. So this is something that's incredible. For those of you that can have an eagle eye and are looking at all the details, you can see that there are some issues here. Like for example, the clouds. And the issue is that the clouds were moving. By the way, I just double-clicked on the smart object. In case you don't know, a smart object is a container that can hold one or more layers, and you can apply non-destructive adjustments, distortions, filters, and transformations. In other words, you can change it all you want. So when you double-click on it, it opens up this container, and from there, you can see the original images. And look at the clouds. The clouds are moving. See that? So to fix that, all you need to do is just create a selection. Oops, move that way too much. Copy it, Control-C to copy, and then check this out. If you just paste, it's going to paste it in the middle. You don't want to do that. You want to press Control-Shift-V. Control-Shift-V is paste in place. Control-V will paste in the middle. But now we have clouds that work, but we have another issue. We have a seam here. Well, create a layer mask. A layer mask allows you to hide pixels, and with black hides, white reveals on the layer mask. I'm just going to paint that seam away. Maybe I need a softer brush. I'm using the drop down, but you could also use the shift and the bracket keys to increase or decrease the brush hardness, which is usually what I do. And there you go. And there you go. I now have a photo without the people there. But what happens if I had gone to the museum and only took one picture? I can't do this whole thing, right? Well, that's where Gen Fill comes in. I can do basically the same thing with Generative Fill. Let me show you guys how you could do that. I'm going to go into another file here, and I just have just one of the photos with a lot of people there. I'm not going to take the time to draw selections because that's going to take too long. So I should have saved an alpha channel with a selection. I'm just going to load that. So now I have a selection with everyone in that photo. And all I need to do now with Gen Fill is, first of all, create the selection, go into Generative Fill, leave it blank, click on Generate, wait for this to go to the cloud, and Photoshop should return pretty realistic results. So in just a couple seconds here, we'll see how good Photoshop is at removing people from an image like this. And it's pretty good, right? I mean, all you really have to do is create a selection. And I know what you may be thinking, well, like in this case, Photoshop, just added whatever that red thing is. Well, no big deal, right? Everything else looks great. I can just make a selection around that, click on Generative Fill, and then work on that piece. Now, to be frank with you, if I was really doing this project, I would probably make multiple selections and just work on certain areas of the image at a time instead of doing one giant one. But I just wanted to show you that you could, in fact, create a large selection and take care of it just with one click. But I feel that I get better results when I do segments of my image at a time instead of just doing the whole thing. So yeah, it's pretty cool, right? That you can just use GenFill for that. Let me open up another image here. Similar example, and I'm just going to be super loose here. I'm just going to make a selection. I'm not even going to be careful. I'm just going to go into his genes and just make a selection out of the people in the background. And I'm going to make, oops, I need to hold Shift to add to my selection. And then I'm going to select these people here. And again, I'm not going to be careful. I'm going to go into her pants and her leg there. Click on Generative Fill. Click on Generate. Did that sound bad? Yeah. I wasn't thinking. I had a stroke. Don't make fun of me. And there, oh, there we go. See, like it doesn't always work. See how it added other people in the background, which is why you can pick a variation that works best, and then you can come around and fix it if you want. So it's not a perfect technology, but as you can see, it saves a whole lot of work because I know you guys have, I know I have, spent hours just removing something simple from a background, where it could easily be done now with GenFill. Let me move on to another example, and I'm going to close these because I'm not going to need them anymore. These were my plan B in case we had no internet. Let me go and we can now talk about adding content to an image. So GenFill is great for removing objects, but it's also good at adding content. So for example, in this case, if we wanted to maybe add a cup of coffee here, we can probably do that. We'll see how it works. I can make a selection around his hand, and I can just add coffee cup in the prompt, click on Generate, and Photoshop will give me 3 variations of this gentleman holding a coffee cup, I hope. Sometimes it'll give me a phone or whatever random object, but it tends to do pretty good. See, like now he's just holding a cup, right? Really good. And I could have said red cup and it would have given me a red cup or whatever. Another thing is, you know what, maybe I don't like these white pants that he's wearing, so I'm just gonna select the white pants and I'll type in blue jeans. And again, Photoshop will take a moment here, and it will return, hopefully, blue jeans. We'll see, like sometimes they're short, sometimes they're leather, but there you go, blue jeans, right? So pretty good. The lighting is great, the perspective is great, but not just with him. Another thing we can do is I can come in here, and by the way, if you're ever on the lasso tool, I like to throw in random tips, right? Tips. The lasso tool allows you to freehand the selection, right? But if you're in the lasso tool and then you hold the Alt key, it'll switch over into the polygonal lasso tool, and then you can make these straight selections, and then you release the Alt key on Windows, that's the Option key on the Mac, and it goes back into the polygonal lasso tool. In this case, since I'm in the trackpad and the angle is weird, I actually let go of the button sooner than I wanted to, so it closed out the selection. But the Alt key switches between those keys. What I'm doing here is now I'm going to select the street here, like so, and I know this is like the worst selection I've ever made in my life, but I think it'll work. Make that selection, go to Generate Fill, and I'll type something like Venetian Canal, and then click on Generate, and we'll see if it works. And I'm also trying to remove the couple that's walking there in the background. So we'll see what that does. It'll just take a second, and there you go. We got a Venetian Canal. Isn't that crazy? So like you can completely generate, change the look and feel of your photos just by a couple of prompts, and it's super realistic. Shadows look great, everything looks great. So if you haven't already, I highly recommend that you play with Generative Fill. And this one, there's a gondola in there, and it's just super cool. Question, yes, sir.
When you send your image up to their servers to be worked on, do they then add it to their database that this program learns from?
Very good question. So according to Adobe, I don't work for Adobe, the answer is no. What they do use to train the model is what you upload to Adobe Stock. So if you're selling your photos to Adobe through Adobe Stock, then the answer is yes, but not when you're using Photoshop. And also, again, I don't work for Adobe, and they've mentioned this publicly, that they're thinking of a payment model for people who upload images to Adobe Stock that are used for the reference of the image that it generates, because Adobe knows exactly what photos the AI used to reference this information. So they're thinking of some sort of payment model for people who upload photos to Adobe Stock, but there's nothing official yet as to what that is. But good question. Yeah, so it's really incredible. And let me show you other examples of really cool things you can do. So if you have an image like this one, and this is a brand new tool in the Photoshop beta, by the way, it's basically the same thing, but it's just like in a different section. It's this thing called Generative Expand right here, right? And what this allows you to do is you can select an aspect ratio, maybe 16:9. Maybe somebody gave you a photo shot on a phone or something. You want to make it widescreen to display on social media, Facebook banner, whatever it is. You can click and drag these handles out to make a larger canvas. In the past, the default was transparent, which is still the default. And then content-aware fill was the option that it gave you in order for Photoshop to generate the missing content on the edges. So let's look at the old technology first, and then we'll look at the new one. So I'll select content-aware fill, which is the old technology. And the way that works is that you would expand it like so. There we go. And then you would fill, or you would commit the change, and then Photoshop will take a moment and fill. And there you go. There you go. So what content-aware does is it analyzes the image that you're working with, and it attempts to figure out what would be on those edges, right, out of that one single image. Now, this is an oversimplification. But imagine now that instead of analyzing that one image, Photoshop has access to millions of images, right? So that's the difference. So now let me show you what's going to happen with the new Generative Expand. So Crop Tool, click on this drop-down menu, and select Generative Expand. I have my 16:9 aspect ratio selected, and I'm just going to crop out like so. I'm going to hit Enter, and Photoshop is going to do its thing. We'll give it a moment here.
Photoshop's not getting rid of its old rules?
No, it does. It does not Photoshop rarely gets rid of anything. But notice how well the result is, right? Just by expanding. Yes, sir.
This is not so much a question but an observation. I'm just thinking about different organizations that host like a photography contest or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are they going to have to like enforce that people aren't going to use AI to just create these spectacular sunset photos?
Right. Well, Adobe's not going to enforce anything, but what Adobe is doing is in the metadata, it's adding that the photo that it outputs has been altered by AI in some way. So, absolutely, right. But it's very difficult to control that. But yes, the one effort Adobe is doing is that there is metadata in the images saying that AI has affected the photo somehow. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's gonna be difficult. But after you do the Generative Expand, the other cool thing that you can do is you can make a selection on the side here like so, and then you can say something else, right? Maybe in this case you want to wait. Why isn't it working? Let me try it again. It doesn't like it. Oh, no connection to the internet. No. I don't know if my internet people are still here, but if not, I have a plan B. No? No? Okay, plan B, guys. Oh, I had so much to show you with Gen AI, but no internet. That's okay. I have a folder called NI for no internet. So still advanced techniques in Photoshop. Let me just open this up. Oh, actually, I think this one might also use the internet. Let me see if it does. I'm just gonna, the wow moment's gonna be gone, but still, if it works, then I'll explain what happens. Yeah, I think it's going to work. Cool. So a lot of times when you're working in Photoshop, specifically with the kind of work that I do, I get a lot of images that may have really bad shadows, really bad I terms of the color. And even though this might look cool to you, and I think it looks cool, I often get photos that look like that and said, hey, we want to put her like in a movie poster with like the sun hitting her, and that lighting really doesn't work. And like, oh my God, how am I going to neutralize that photo? And there's a lot of techniques to neutralize photos in Photoshop. I'm sure a lot of you guys have used the curves adjustment layer or any number of other tools to neutralize a photo. But I like to think about Photoshop in terms of like, what does the tool do rather than the label that the tool has. So there is a tool that, it's meant to colorize black and white images, right? Filter, neural filters, and if you go into Colorize, Photoshop will colorize that image, right? It colorized it. So Photoshop didn't care that the photo had an original color. It pretended like it was a black and white photo, and just with one click, I was able to neutralize that photo, like super fast, right? And the cool thing about that is that I have a lot of other options, right? I can start adjusting the saturation, all these sliders. To be frank with you, I personally don't use those sliders. What I like to do instead is click on this box, output as a new color layer. And when you do that, you'll get that result and you'll freak out and say, never mind, I want to go back. But that's what you want. That's what you want. And let me show you why. I'm going to output to a new layer and press OK. So now I have my original layer, and then on top of that, I have a color layer. If you notice, the blending mode is set to color. What color does is it takes the hue and saturation of the current layer, but uses the luminosity of the layer below. In other words, the hue and saturation are the top layer and the details are the bottom layer. And you want that because I can now do this. I can create a new layer and then call this layer, I'm going to call it shirt. So we know what we're working with. Shirt, Control-Alt-G. Control-Alt-G on Windows, Command-Option-G on the Mac creates a clipping mask, which means that the layer below is going to control the visibility of the layer on top. That includes the blending mode. So the layer below has the color blending mode, and the layer above has the normal blending mode, but it doesn't matter because the layer below is color in this context. Then I'm going to go into the brush tool, and if I disable the color layer, notice that her shirt was originally green. Photoshop got that color wrong, but I can easily fix it by just going into the brush tool. When you're in the brush tool, if you hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, you can go into the eyedropper tool, select that green from that shirt, which is very difficult in this trackpad, and I guess I'm going to have to zoom in because I'm not so precise without it. So Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, click, there's my green. Double click on the hand tool to fit the image to screen, enable that color layer, and what I can do now with the brush tool is simply paint in the green of that shirt, right? I can paint it in. And you might be wondering, well, can't you just paint that in the color layer? And yeah, I can definitely paint that in the color layer. I don't need to create that clipping mask. And I can paint that in, right? And it looks exactly the same and it works. But if you remember, when I started this demo, I mentioned that I work in a way that I assume people are going to look at my file and are going to want to mess with it and do something completely different. Or some movie studio is going to say, hey, I don't like that green shirt, make it red. So how do I do that now if it's on that one single layer? It becomes very difficult. Or time consuming at least, maybe not so difficult. But by having this green on a separate layer, I can easily disable it. I can enable it, or if they say, hey, we don't like the green, can you make it red? Very easy, go into the hue and saturation adjustment layer, and then just make it red, and there you go, it's done. So always try to separate things into different layers so that you have maximum control. Even if you're working by yourself and nobody's ever gonna see your files, you might come back to a file a month, a year later, and you might wanna do something, and if everything is flattened or not modularized, it's going to be very, very difficult to control. So I recommend just thinking ahead as you're working and just keeping everything separate. So I guess the main point of this specific demo is that you need to keep in mind what the tool does rather than what the label says, because you would have never thought that you could neutralize an image by using the Colorize feature. So I hope that this is beneficial for you. Also, this feature works on video. If I have this I have this video file here, so I don't know if you know this, but Photoshop can open up video files. So I have this video here, right, of this lady just walking. It's a black and white video, of course, and I can go into filter, neural filters, and choose Colorize, output to a smart filter, press OK, and now the video has been colorized just with one click. And you can export that as a video, of course, by going into the flyout menu and choosing render video, and you can export that as an MP4 or whatever you want. Photoshop is a little slow in rendering video, but hey, colorize a video with one click. You'll wait, drinking a coffee or something. But yeah, let me see. We have about 5 minutes, and I'm going to show you another super fun. Yeah, too bad. I was going to, by the way, I'll mention it. I couldn't show it because the internet went down. But if you have footage, just like you saw with the neural filter, that will also work with Gen Fill. So if you shoot something on a tripod, you can then fill the edges with Gen Fill or add set pieces to your video using Gen Fill within Photoshop as well. And I was going to show that, but the internet went out. Let me bring up one other image here just to show you guys. Masking. I know a lot of people struggle with masking, and I'm going to show you one of my favorite tips on creating flyaway hair. So if we wanted to composite her into this image, and actually I'm going to hide the bar because I don't really need it since we're not doing any Gen Fill. But if I wanted to remove her from the background, I can go into the remove background button here and click on it, and it will remove the background. It will do a decent job, but she's got a lot of flyaway hairs that are very, very difficult to select. And the secret that pros use is if it's too difficult to select, don't select it, just fake it. So let me show you how to fake it. One of my favorite features of faking, so to speak, flyaway hair is by finding an image where flyaway hair is actually really easy or much easier to select, and then use that to create a brush to apply to the other image. So for example, in this case, I love the way her hair is flying out, and that should be a lot easier to select than this because of that busy background. So what I like to do is I first like to crop this, and I'll remove the ratio. I'm going to crop this so that I only have that strand of hair right around here. There we go, that's all we need. I'm going to use a method called channel pool, channel-based selection, channel-based mask. It's got a bunch of names. The point is that you go into the channels and you can see your red, green, and blue channel, and just look for the channel that has the most contrast between the foreground and background, in this case the blue channel, and we can make a selection out of this. With a selection, white selects and black deselects. So we want to invert this. We want the hair to be white. So I can press Control-I on Windows, Command-I on the Mac to invert, and then try to make the background as dark as possible by using curves, levels, whatever technique you want to use. As long as the background remains black and the foreground remains white, you're good. So I'm just gonna, just increase this to like right about there. Here's another trick. If you go into the burn tool and select shadows, you will paint primarily on the shadows. You will make the shadows darker. So I'm just going to increase my brush size by tapping on the right bracket key, and I can just paint right here. And now all these background pixels are completely black, and I can now make a selection. Control and click to make a selection, and whoops, I did it on, I should have duplicated the channel. Make sure you duplicate the channel. If you don't duplicate it, not a big deal. I'm just going to go into the solid color here, and I'm just going to make the hair black, and there you go. That's going to be my brush, and that might be a little too light, so I'm just going to duplicate it to make it more intense. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the Define Brush preset, and I'm going to create a brush out of that right there. So I'll press OK. So now when I come back into this image and paint, I have, oops, let me create a new layer here and reduce my brush size because it's too large, and I think that's the issue why we can't see it. Whoops, it's not working. Oh, I'm in the wrong, I don't have a brush. I have to select my brush. The last brush I created should be at the bottom here. There it is, and when I paint, I get that. So I just gotta select a color that is similar to the model's hair here. We'll just say that color, and reduce my brush size. I'll tap on the left bracket key. There it is, and when I paint, I get that, which is gonna work great. Now, from this menu here, I can flip the x-axis and maybe increase the spacing, and you can see what that looks like. So now, using the arrow, the left and right arrow keys, I can rotate the brush and sort of find the similar positioning of the hair, and I can keep selecting color that is similar, and then just keep doing that. And when you're done, you should have something that has better edges. And by the way, these edges need to be behind her. There we go. But you can see what that is looking like. Much, much better edges. I have a file that's completed, and using that exact same technique, I was able to get really, really good edges. And as you can see here, when I scroll down, you can see all the different layers that create that hair. But again, if it's too difficult to select, don't select it, just ignore it and paint it back in. You can paint it back in by hand. I can't draw, so I find an image where I have good hair and use that to create a brush and just paint that alongside the edges. And it looks like I'm out of time. So everybody, thank you so much for joining me.